Hello, welcome back to the Space Gulag. Today we're going to find out what would have happened had Experimental Unit 99 joined the Empire. Before we begin, special thanks to our patrons. Earth Series Part 6 is coming out on Saturday, so get ready to check that out. Check out the Twitch, the podcast, and the merch that is available until, well, Sunday, basically, yeah. Anyways, our story begins on Kaller. The Bad Batch had just interacted with Jedi Master Depa Billaba. She was sending her student along with the Bad Batch to the front lines, while her and Captain Gray picked up the rest of the forces and prepared for the next leg of their assault. Though Depa would never have the opportunity to lead that assault because the clones would execute Order 66. The Bad Batch wouldn't have the same conditioned response to this, but they would turn around and see the Jedi Master be shot down, only for her student to be wielding a lightsaber running away. The Bad Batch members were alerted to this response of the clones, and so Hunter set his gun for stun and shot Caleb down. The Jedi Padawan was completely knocked out as he crashed to the ground and dropped his lightsaber. The other three members looked at each other as Hunter said it was just a precaution. He didn't assume that Caleb did anything wrong, he just wanted to do this in case there was something wrong. Hunter told Echo to ask the Regs what was going on, as he turned to ask Tech what was also going on. Tech told Hunter that the new orders in were that the Jedi were accused of committing high treason, the order being to execute Order 66. Hunter asked Tech how the Jedi did that. In that same period of time, Crosshair walked past Hunter after hearing the words execute Order 66 and lined up his barrel to Caleb's head and pulled the trigger before turning around and looking at his squad mates. Hunter whipped around and asked what he was doing. Crosshair exclaimed a quiet, following orders. Hunter admitted that while those were apparently the orders, that was out of line. Crosshair jumped back, responding that betraying the Republic was out of line for the Jedi. If they could simply commit treason, they were not to be trusted. Hunter stood quietly for a moment and looked away. He didn't have much to refute by that statement. The truth is, they didn't know what was happening, but apparently the Jedi had betrayed the Republic, and now they would be hunted. 2 less Jedi to hunt. One would have to guess. After a couple more hours, the Bad Batch would leave Kaller and return to Camino. When they returned, they would be greeted by a number of V-Wings that would guide them in. The Bad Batch, while surprised, wouldn't think much of it as they got to the facility and started walking around it. They noticed that the Coruscant Guard was present, otherwise known as shock troopers, as a couple troopers carried away a dead Jedi. The Bad Batch looked over at the Jedi as the lightsaber dropped off the cot they were being carried on. The Bad Batch reported to their room and awaited further orders, which eventually came at the assembly to watch the Chancellor talk about the attempt on his life. During the time in between, Tech talked about the clone troopers and their inhibitor chips and how they influenced them during the execution of Order 66. Though Tech suggested it was possible it affected other members of the Bad Batch. Crosshair growled, suggesting that it didn't make a difference, he was just following orders. Tech admitted that while they were orders, nothing was confirmed, and killing the Jedi, especially the ones not involved in that plot, wouldn't be right. Crosshair rebutted by saying that one Jedi could do it, then all of them could do it. It wasn't a matter of who or when, it was a matter of Republic security. Tech immediately took a disliking to Crosshair's attitude since the decision to execute Order 66. Regardless, during the assembly, the Bad Batch members would see how deformed the newly crowned Emperor of the galaxy looked, and they thought that maybe the Jedi had a part to play in that. Hunter decided that they would serve the Empire, and on any case, that it would likely be the best situation for them to abide by for the time being. Considering the Empire was likely going to be the same exact thing as the Republic, just without the Jedi, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Though the troopers noticed that Tarkin was present on Camino, it wouldn't be long after noticing him that they would be ordered to head into the Outer Rim and kill some insurgents. The Bad Batch had no issue with this, assuming that they would be insurgents that supported the CIS. Though when they arrived, they found the insurgents to just be regular people, not clankers. Because the Bad Batch decided that they would join the Empire, it was their decision to go forward with the mission, and they wanted to hunt the insurgents. Saul Guerrero was the leader of this group, and early on he decided that he didn't like this new empire. This would result in negativity for him, as he was now being hunted. While the Bad Batch wasn't exactly on the same page with hunting these people, as good soldiers, they followed orders. Hunter, Tech, Wrecker, they all went down the middle as Echo took the left flank, and Crosshair took the distance shots. The first round went off and Saw was taken down immediately. He was clipped in the shoulder, and then the forest erupted in blaster fire. The Bad Batch moved in as the rebels tried to fight off the clones they couldn't see. They may have had the territorial advantage, but they lost in the dead of night to a squad that had no issue executing them. Crosshair picked off 3, 4, 5 more individuals as Echo pulled around the corner, shooting the engine of the vehicle that they were going to drive to escape. The squad emerged from the trees as Saul looked at his dead friends surrounding him. He looked at Hunter and then the rest of them, asking if they really had no issue betraying the Jedi. There used to be good clones. They were just servants now. Hunter pulled out his pistol and shot Saul in the head. The probe droid in the area reported everything back to Tarkin on Kamino. Tarkin had received a report from one of the Bad Batch members referring to the hesitance from the other members during Order 66 on Kalar. Tarkin had sent the Bad Batch on this mission to test if the Bad Batch wasn't actually loyal or not, though when they returned, Tarkin decided that they would be perfect troopers for the Empire, and so he forced them into labs to be experimented on. They'd be given enhancements to their inhibitor chips. This increase to their inhibitor chips would force them to be much more dormant and much more loyal to the Empire. This would be a weird look for the Bad Batch, especially since they were typically the rebels of the clone army. They loved to disobey orders and to do what they wanted to do. Regardless, Tarkin informed them that their next mission would revolve around hunting down a band of Jedi Padawans. They'd be placed under the control of Admiral Rampart for the time being, until they were needed elsewhere. The Bad Batch would be outfitted with new Imperial stylized armor. This armor would reflect the Empire, colorless and stone cold. They would go forth and hunt down a group of Jedi Padawans. All the Jedi they hunted on this mission would be under the age of 15. It was a massacre, and it wasn't even fair. The Bad Batch didn't have much of a reaction to this. Their inhibitor chips were locked in and at full potential. For the next 2 months, the Bad Batch would be sent across the galaxy on numerous missions for the Empire, doing what they needed to do regardless of who they came across. They spent some time putting down groups of citizens on remote worlds in the Mid-Rim. The Bad Batch had no issue with doing anything they were doing, though one of the members was hit on the head really hard and he wasn't exactly following orders to the same extent. That was Echo. His inhibitor chip was already damaged at Skywalker Minor when he was captured by the Separatists and the Techno Union, though the inhibitor chip was still intact enough for it to be exploited by the Empire when they accelerated the power of the inhibitor chips. Echo wasn't really sure what to do. The truth is, he didn't feel the same way as his teammates, and so, during one mission, he snuck away from them. He knew they were under the control of the inhibitor chips Tech had mentioned after the Battle of Kalar, and so he knew that the safest option for him was to run away. Echo didn't want to hurt his squad mates, but he also didn't believe he would survive if he tried to convince them that what they were doing was wrong. While all along, Echo felt like he was the only one that could ever abandon the clone army. But the truth is, there were hundreds of clones across the Empire, seeing their value disappearing as the Empire began to move forward. The clones didn't support what they were doing, like betraying the people they once protected, like Captain Howitzer on Ryloth. The Empire wasn't what they were bred for, and they felt like they were expendable after they spent 3 years fighting a traumatic war for an ungrateful people. Echo found himself off the planet, and he disappeared into the galaxy, looking and hoping to find old friends of his. There was still a chance he'd find them, but he had no idea what to expect. On the other hand, when the Bad Batch woke up, they discovered that their squad mate had abandoned them. Hunter immediately got onto the hunt by looking after Echo's tracks, to which he began following them from their camp to the nearest spaceport. They knew they'd be able to find Echo, but the truth is, he wasn't the only member of this who wasn't really feeling this entire Empire thing. The other member was Tech. And the reason Tech wasn't really with it was because he could see all the records of the clones that had disappeared for disobeying orders. It made him sick. While yes, traditionally, Experimental Unit 99 received harsh treatment from the regs, Tech was able to delineate those negative memories from what was right and what was wrong. Because it had been so long since their inhibitor chips were heightened, he was beginning to wear off from the treatment, especially since he understood what was happening. Tech, being as smart as he was able to bypass the chip and see everything from another perspective, a scientific perspective, though he kept this close to his chest, because Wrecker was a bit of a hassle with the chip activated. Wrecker went from a lovable, reckless clone to a savage animal who wouldn't hesitate to rip anyone apart for disobeying an order. He killed a reg because he wouldn't let him investigate something. It wasn't a pleasant sight, nor a pleasant sound. Tech was able to reasonably assume that Echo's chip malfunctioned due to what happened at Skako Minor, and he likely hadn't said anything about not feeling the effects, lasting long enough to stay inside of the squad until he felt like he was safe to leave. Tech was right by this assumption, though with Crosshair, Hunter, and Wrecker so eager to find and kill their treacherous teammate, Tech was worried for what would come next, hoping that Echo got out early enough to buy himself some time. Tech was also smart enough to hide his feelings from his squadmates, especially since Crosshair had also become a bit of a belligerent since his chip was activated. He typically was cold and calculated, but at this point, he was just being edgy, and it was cringy to say the least, always chewing on those doggone toothpicks. The Bad Batch would report the missing trooper to Admiral Rampart, who would order the men to hunt him down and to kill him. Echo had valuable information that could harm Imperial efforts to turn the Senate against the cloning program. Of course, Rampart wouldn't tell the Bad Batch about that. Rampart knew that it would be his head if he allowed Echo to become a loose cannon, especially since Tarkin was making moves to make clones from the Bad Batch as they were more elite than the traditional clone trooper. Rampart knew he couldn't mess this up because Tarkin didn't accept failure. The Bad Batch got to work with the notion that if they failed, they would be executed. Once they entered the spaceport, they began demanding the location of a trooper with one hand. The sad disadvantage to Echo was the missing hand replaced with that of a droid hand. It made him stick out, and it didn't take long for the Bad Batch members to follow a trail to a spaceport that would take Echo to a planet in the mid-rim by the name of Ferelia. The planet was mostly away from Imperial territory, and it could take Echo to a batch of planets of which he could disappear, one of them being Mapuzo, which hadn't seen any Imperial interference yet, and the other planet being Daiyu, where most people just went to disappear anyways. Echo was already on Ferelia. There he was meeting up with Captain Rex, who had been helping clones escape the clutches of the Empire since the end of the Clone War. He had a clone commander with him by the name of Commander Wolf. Though Wolf wasn't frequent on these missions, he had just been picked up off of Mapuzo and he was coming with Rex on this op to help him recover Echo before they disappeared off the map as well. When Rex and Echo met up, they were thrilled to be with each other again. They were brothers from the 501st after all. Though Rex knew the importance of moving out because the Bad Batch acted fast and they would be here on their trail soon. Unluckily, there wasn't any transports bouncing off-world in the next 17 hours, so they would have to bunker down and wait it out. The worst part about this wait is that the next available vessel wouldn't be on Ferelia before the arrival of the Bad Batch, who was taking the Marauder here. When Echo noticed the Marauder landing in the spaceport, he told them they needed to escape. Rex asked about the inhibitor chips, to which Echo said he didn't really know, he just knew that the Empire had been experimenting on them after they killed Saw Gerrera, because everyone seemed a bit different after that. They acted a lot different, too. Rex was obviously shocked to hear that Echo partook in the execution of Gerrera, but he realized it wasn't necessarily his fault. That was a big thing for Captain Rex. He didn't hold clones accountable for something they couldn't control. Wolf was having a difficult time, because while he didn't kill Master Plo, he couldn't stop it. Wolf was almost killed by a Jedi Master and a Padawan duo elsewhere during the Battle of Cato Nemodia. Commander Wolf was very on edge about the Jedi, because the Jedi all saw the clones as threats. While Wolf didn't want to threaten a Jedi, he loved his Jedi comrades. It was because of Plo Koon that he ever survived the Clone War, but he was still a bit traumatized by it. Regardless, Echo told the two clones that Crosshair had already gotten into position and he was waiting on a cliff for Echo to show himself. Rex told the two to stay put and have their stun guns ready to stun the members if they got the opportunity, because Rex was going to try and sneak up on Crosshair if he didn't get picked off before he did. Rex had a cover-up, so it was likely that he would be able to make it up to the cliff to stun Crosshair without being noticed. The mission was to stun the clones and take them to a place to remove their inhibitor chips. Where? No one knew yet, but that didn't matter at the moment. What mattered was getting the Bad Batch under their control. 30 minutes passed by, and then Wrecker barged down the door, throwing both Echo and Commander Wolf to the back of the room. Echo was trapped under the door and completely knocked out, and Wolf was trying to get up after crashing through a bookshelf. Wrecker lowered his weapon and aimed it forward as Hunter came in holding his knife, ready to gut Echo. Hunter noticed that there was another clone in there, and he moved to kill Wolf before Wolf could do anything. Though before Hunter or Wrecker could kill Echo or Wolf, they were stunned in the back by Tech, as he moved behind the wall for cover. The moment he shot those stun rounds, a blast flew to the room. Crosshair was watching. He knew something was off with Tech, and he didn't hesitate to try and kill his brother. Crosshair was so focused he didn't notice anything until he heard rocks drop behind him. That was Rex, who was behind him. Crosshair whipped around and shot, barely missing Rex's shoulder, to which the captain used a stun round to hit Crosshair in the face and knock him out cold. Rex radioed down to Wolf, who was the only one conscious who filled Rex in. Captain Rex told him to get everyone ready to leave. They would have to use the Marauder to get out of this planet. Rex came up with an idea of how they could remove the inhibitor chips. There was a planet in the mid-rim called Baraka, and it was essentially a Venator graveyard. Venators that survived battles, but with too much damage, would be sent here and decommissioned from the Grand Army of the Republic. There had to be a chance that they could get there and help the other clones remove their inhibitor chips. It would be a long process, firstly getting Wrecker, Crosshair, and Hunter into the Marauder, but then the more difficult part would be keeping them sedated until they found a Venator on Baraka. The Marauder would pull up next to a Venator, which Wolf and Rex would use welds to cut through the side of the ship, opening it up so that the clones could pile into the corridor. Tech was manning the ship as Echo, Rex, and Wolf brought the other three in. Tech found a place to land the Marauder before he made his way into the Venator. The three clones on the inside would make their way for the medical wing and get to work immediately. The process wasn't exactly easy, but after a couple of hours, Wolf, Hunter, Echo, Tech, Wrecker, and Crosshair all had their inhibitor chips removed. Once everything and everyone got up, they talked about, well, everything. There was a lot to discuss. The Bad Batch remembered everything they did, and they weren't proud of it, especially not the death of Caleb Doom or the other Padawans. Crosshair was the least apologetic, but he certainly didn't see the value in serving the Empire at this point, especially because of the experiments they were forcing onto the Bad Batch. Though Rex told the Bad Batch that there were several things they could do positively to affect the galaxy. There was so much negativity and they could do so much positivity that the galaxy could only prove to do better if they put themselves into it. The clones had a much larger role in the longevity of the galaxy, and they couldn't just whisk it away. The Bad Batch understood what Rex was saying. Rex was glad. He told the Bad Batch that there was a clone inside of a fortress on Anaxis, and he had been captured for desertion. Rex wanted the Bad Batch to go there while he and Wolf returned to the core. There was another group of clones trying to abandon the army there. The mission for the Bad Batch would have them rescuing Commando Gregor. He was a clone trooper who survived the worst of the Clone Wars, and he was repositioned on the fort with the rest of the commandos to instruct the new Stormtrooper class troopers. While the Bad Batch was here, they also came across a little girl who recognized them. Her name was Omega, and she claimed to be their brother. The Bad Batch couldn't leave her behind, especially with Imperial troopers approaching, so they took her with them. It turned out she was actually one of the original clones, though she didn't have any accelerated aging, which is why she was still a little girl. She was simply a clone of Jango Fett, someone who was alongside that of Alpha, who later became known as Boba Fett. Regardless, the Bad Batch took her away, and while she was with them, they wouldn't fall into the service for a Trandoshan. Rather, they would work hard to support other clones trying to leave the army. It meant an unhealthy way of life, especially for the first couple of years, but it wouldn't be that big of a deal once they got more allies. The Empire was becoming more and more unfavorable, and with rebel cells popping up, it was very easy to support the small rebellion, especially since there wasn't a radical cell like the one that would have followed in Saw Gerrera. Without such radical behavior, people weren't afraid of the rebellion, and aid piled in, because only negativity came from the Empire, and it was very easy to see. The Bad Batch became intertwined with a little movement called the Path. It allowed them to work closely with other clones and with Jedi Masters such as Quinlan Vos and Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Bad Batch was very successful in their aid with the rebellion. Over the years, it led them to be a part of a pivotal strike with a young man named Cassian Andor in the world of Aldhani. They weren't there for a rebellion on Ferrix, but they would have loved to have been there when Andor and the rebellion struck for the first time. By this point, though, they were all going and aging really rapidly, and the little girl was now a young woman. Omega was leading the charge most of the time, while her older brothers ate the acceleration in their age. Though for the members of the Bad Batch it didn't deter them, especially not when a squad of rebels needed their help on Lothal. This rebel group was called Ghost Squadron. There was only 4 members, Hera Syndulla, Chopper, Sabine, and Zeb. While on Lothal, they picked up a young boy who happened to be Force sensitive, which led the Bad Batch to bringing in an old contact by the name of Fulcrum to help train the boy. Ahsoka Tano would be very insightful to the growth of Ezra Bridger. Though the tragedy for the Bad Batch would be dealing with the struggles of war and the loss of one of their brothers at the Battle of Lothal. Echo would give up his life for the Ghost Squadron by using his arm port to delay an explosion. His death was very similar to another one of his brothers from the 501st by the name of Hardcase, who sacrificed himself during the Battle of Umbara during the Clone War. The Bad Batch would continue their fight, while Wolf and Rex would pop in and out. Without much other purpose, they would serve until the very bitter end. With the Bad Batch, the Rebellion had a great covert op team and they utilized it as much as they could. It wouldn't be handy to them during the Battle of Scarif. The only reason being is that the Bad Batch was currently off on another mission on Mon Cala during the Battle of Scarif. The mission to Mon Cala allowed the Rebellion to access more critical weaponry earlier in the Galactic Civil War. This would lead to help the Rebellion securing Mon Calamari cruisers, especially after Admiral Raddus and his MC-75 were lost at the Battle of Scarif. The Bad Batch would continue in their service, meeting the heroes of the Battle of Yavin, and even helping them out from time to time, serving at the Battle of Hoth and all the way to the bitter end, though Tech would die of a natural death before he could ever make it to the Battle of Endor. At Endor, Wrecker would be picked off by an AT-ST while saving a group of Ewoks from getting crushed by a tree. Hunter, Crosshair, Omega, and Rex would be the few remaining clones to see the rise and the fall of the Empire. They would continue out their service, respectfully, until their natural deaths. While one may contest that their service to the Empire was a disservice to themselves, it was their capability to change for the better. And while yes, it was their original choice to join the Empire, the hearts of each of the members of Experimental Unit 99 were always in the right place. Omega would go on inside of the Rebellion, and she would become a representative inside the New Republic, a role she would fill with dedication and enjoyment. Omega would find herself alongside the Resistance when the Hosnian system was destroyed by the First Order. Much like her older brothers, Omega would serve with the Resistance until their final victory at Exegol, several years after the fall of the Empire. Omega would be the last clone alive from the Kaminoans, and she would live out her life to the fullest, all the way to the end, always keeping close to her heart the memories of those who inspired her, the memories of her brothers from Experimental Unit 99. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Jonathan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Darth Cheesy, Apollo, Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Lemon Knight, Flynn Vinces, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Hit two of the links in this video. I don't know what's coming next, but it is. If you want to see a what if, let me know below, or comments about the crossovers. Check out the Twitch community, Discord, Patreon, podcast, and merch store if you want to support me in other ways. And let's talk about the story. Also, I got other channels. You can go check them out down below as well. So let's talk about the story. Obviously, another Bad Batch story for the most recent episode of Bad Batch. I always try to avoid spoilers with these videos because it's, you know, it's kind of like you don't want to spoil a Bad Batch episode for people that haven't seen it. I know this is coming out on Thursday, but you know, I try to avoid those spoilers, so I didn't really talk about anything from the Bad Batch episode. But this was still a fun video for us, and I know I can already see the comments coming in about the whole Exegol thing and all that stuff. Bad Batch is part of Disney canon, and I'm going with Disney canon for this story because, yeah, that's why. Because Bad Batch is part of the Disney canon. And while there's certain aspects I don't agree with, I will embrace it because it is the established canon. And that's just who I am. But the story itself was actually really fun. It was kind of fun because, like, I know the story, like, it hinders on the point of the Bad Batch joining the Empire, and the whole title is about them joining the Empire. But it was kind of fun because, like, the Bad Batch wouldn't really just stay with the Empire, you know. Like, there's definitely a scenario in which they could join the Empire and stay within the Empire, but I kind of did that last week with them with them and the inhibitor chips, and so with this one, I got to have fun with them, like, not being completely controlled by the inhibitor chips, because, like, one, for example, Tech is too smart just to be like, oh yeah, the inhibitor chips, that doesn't do much for me, or that does a lot for me, and not, like, be like, oh wait, I kind of know what's happening, and not outthink the inhibitor chip. And so, like, I think Tech and Echo would be the first ones to be like, yeah, I don't really want to do this. And it would take kind of a miracle for the Bad Batch to kind of rejoin them. And so you might be saying, there might be comments right now saying like, well, how's the Bad Batch affect the story? The Bad Batch affects the story because they fill a role for Kanan. You know, if Kanan isn't a part of the Battle of Lothal, you know, the rebels probably don't succeed in the Battle of Yavin, or that whole crucial step that takes place for the Battle of Lothal to be so pivotal for the Galactic Civil War. Without the Bad Batch being there, that kind of gets rid of that. And so them killing Kanan or killing Caleb kind of makes them responsible for filling his role. And so Echo fills that role in the Battle of Lothal. And I thought it'd be fun to have, you know, the members of the Bad Batch live to the Battle of Endor. But I had, you know, at a certain point, they're not going to live forever. And so, you know, my personal favorite is Tech, and having to kill off Tech because of old age definitely hurt. And then having, you know, Wrecker get domed by an ATST while trying to save a bunch of teddy bears also kind of hurts. But the ending for Omega is great, and I'm so glad I got to include Omega in the story, because like I don't really get a chance to include Omega. Like the last couple of scenarios didn't really allow room for Omega to exist within the story, and so this was really fun because I love Omega. She's so adorable, and like having her just like be able to become an adult and like become like her own functional individual, and still like remember the Bad Batch, remember her brothers, and be inspired by them as she moves not just from the rebellion to the New Republic, but from the New Republic into the Resistance, is that actually so cool, because like you can almost imagine Omega being like kind of like Cassian's mother in Andor, but she's like that age in, you know, The Rise of Skywalker, and that's kind of like kind of cool. Like she's just like this old woman, like, you know, like I've seen it all, like I'm gonna fight to the bitter end, and I think that's so cool. Like it's kind of like badass, if I'm not gonna lie. So you know, I always try and pay homage to the characters, and I never got a chance to do that with her in the last couple episodes, so it was great to do that with her in this episode. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all. Spread the love. Earth Part 6 is coming out on Saturday. I'll see you then. May the Force be with you.